Yeah.
Okay, for Zoom, we actually only have about 40 minutes for the meeting. So if it cuts off, I will be sending you a link on an email just in case. That's just like for emergency if we run out of time. It'll just send you to a different Zoom meeting. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so let's get started. So my name is Jessica Garcia. This is my partner, Ada Reyes. It is April 10th, 2020. It is 2 p.m. and we are interviewing Yareli Ariola for the purpose of gathering personal information and experiences on the community organization of 826 Valencia. So first off, can you tell us about yourself, include any information about where you're from and how you got to 826?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Yarelia Arriola. I am originally from Sinaloa, Mexico. I grew up in San Diego, California. And how did I get to 826? Wow, what a journey. I actually went to school at UC Santa Cruz. I graduated in 2017 and immediately after did an AmeriCorps year with a very similar organization called the Young Writers Program. Actually, the founders of 826 Valencia helped my former boss, Julia Chiapella, start that organization. So it was a very similar model where we like helped with reading and writing with students and did like in classroom projects, like literally the same model. And one of 826 Valencia's like directors would come down to Santa Cruz and lead volunteer trainings for us. And then I got introduced to 826. And then fast forward a year, two, I moved to the Bay Area, apply for this job, and I've been here since last August. So I'm very new to the organization.
Okay, since we know that you went to San Diego State, could you, the second question is, what is your educational background? So how have your studies supported the work you're doing now?
Yeah, so I actually went to UC Santa Cruz.
My bad.
I grew up in San
Santa
Diego.
Cruz.
All good. I graduated with a BA in sociology and education. So I feel like the things that I studied directly like influence the work that I do, especially since it was an education like major. I'm literally working in education right now, and things that I learned there are like, and same with like the sociology background, like helping you understand like the different systems in place that affect students and just like different barriers that students of color might face, and like really understanding that like really in depth and like historically, like I think really helps like people in education to understand and connect students to resources that they might not have for like historical reasons, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. What role do you play at 826?
Yeah. So my official title is an in-schools program coordinator. So that means that I lead and coordinate projects in the schools. So I create curriculum, create assignments, create supplemental materials, and work really closely with teachers to support in a writing assignment. So that could look like, for example, I was working with Everett Middle School on a cookbook project. So that meant that I was working really closely with the teacher in developing assignments and also like supplemental materials to help students get to that finished stage of their writing. So it looks like providing like different materials to help them edit their work and like checklists and things that would help them advance their pieces. And I also co-lead our youth leadership advisory board, which meets weekly. And this is a program that pays students $500 per semester to tutor in our centers and also learn and develop as leaders in the community. So those are my two main things that I do, with a bunch of like little like admin stuff that involves like that helps me run, as a coordinator, as well as just like bigger projects that live in my team.
So I'm going to skip question number 4 just because it's a little bit repetitive and I feel like you kind of went over it. So I wanted to ask, what is like a brief like historical background of 826 Valencia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's actually one of like an older organization. It was actually founded in 2002 in the mission by an educator named Ninive Caligari and the author Dave Eggers. We actually get a lot of people who come into 826 Valencia literally asking if they can meet the author Dave Eggers, but he's not there anymore. But they basically 826 Valencia, they landed at 826 Valencia, but because it was based for retail, they had to come up with like a storefront. So that's how the pirate store was like created, because of where 826 is zoned, it has to sell something. So what, and according to them, it looked like a pirate store, so they decided to sell pirate supplies, and that's how the pirate supply store came about. And then behind the store is actually where all the writing takes place, right? We have our after school tutoring site, and also we lead workshops for communities, for students in the community, like 2 or 3 times a night. And we also have evening tutoring, and on the weekends we do other workshops and Sunday tutoring. But it really was just like especially because it was formed with an educator and an author, it was really cemented in the idea of helping students in the neighborhood with their writing and figuring out a way to help connect like community members who had time to like support students and get supporting students in a place that was like local and accessible to them.
You mentioned a little bit about the organization's like the background and how writing was a really important aspect of it. Overall, like what would you say some of the values that you have learned from 86 are important to you?
Yeah, so our values and our mission is supporting under-resourced students ages 6 to 18 with their creative and expository writing skills, and helping teachers inspire their students to write. So that's our overall mission. So that is like why the programs that we do are that it's really to incite like creativity amongst students. And I think really like I think one thing that I really love that I think also connects to me and why I do this type of work is that it really highlights like giving students a platform to share their writing, right? To use their voices, to enact change, and really that those are things that are very cemented in the projects that we do and the way that we teach students and the way that we encourage them to write. We definitely want them to know that they have a voice, and just because they're young doesn't mean that no one will hear them. And so with our platforms like on Instagram and Twitter, we're always posting student writing and always shouting out our students. And that's like definitely a way that I think like social justice can come about, right? Teaching the youth that they have a voice.
Okay. So for 7, it's how do these values help you when organizing the projects you work with in classroom settings? I know you kind of brushed on it. If you want to like give us an example in one particular project, that would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, well, one, I'm just gonna like naming the fact that like I'm Latina, that I was undocumented prior, that I come from a low income background. I think I'm very honest with my identities in the classroom, and I think that really helps students connect to me. Like, you know, helping students like feel more comfortable, especially because sometimes it is a little weird that, you know, this like group of adults is just coming into your classroom and you're gonna get homework help with them, right? So like I think easing it when like they have like a person that looks like them, a person that sounds like them and can talk like them, and that understands what they're talking about, you know, like is really important. So I think anytime I go into a classroom, anytime I'm leading a project, I'm very honest about my identities and I don't hold back on them. And I think it really helps just like with setting up and organizing like projects that I also like tell tutors that, right? Like, for example, like with the Everett class, I kept naming that we were working with like only girls of color and that we should know that. And so like, you know, creating resources for volunteers, to know how to work with students and to not like make students feel uncomfortable and to like be really like responsive to those needs, because I was one of those kids, right? I grew up in the public school system. I was a free and reduced kid, like lunch kid, like all those things I share with these students. So it's like really important to me to like honor those identities and support volunteers in supporting our students.
I like how you mentioned honoring identities. I think that's like a really important aspect in a children's like ability to write and read and enjoy school and education. What would be like one affirmation or teaching practice that you utilize for students to like create their own like creative writing?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one like thing that I continue to like tell students, especially is some students have a lot of like insecurity about writing, whether it's because they're a second language learner or they just are a little behind than what like they should be, even though like learning is not everyone goes at the same pace and people can be in different stages of that. I think one affirmation I definitely use is that like write it however you want to write it, whether you want to write in Spanglish, whether you want to use slang, whether you want to cuss. Of course we're gonna like, you know, like censor you, but you're gonna have you can cuss essentially in your draft. I will take it out later, but encouraging students to really like own their voice and that they don't have to change it for any reason. That if this is how you write, this is more than acceptable. And I think that like, you know, for a student to hear that like, oh, I can write in Spanglish, oh, I can like write in Spanish and then like have my tutor help me translate it, like that's really awesome, right? Like that might be the first time that someone's like validated that like aspect of their writing. So I think, yeah, that's definitely something I always do.
So considering, you know, this space being literally a space for like kids to come and like do their creative writing and stuff, like how has like gentrification like impacted that space?
Yeah, that is I mean, you know, all throughout San Francisco, that's something that's seen. Specifically in the mission, I think we've worked, like one thing about the mission that's been really beautiful to just like learn about is how some families have been literally with 826 since it opened. We have seen all of like, for example, we have a señora who's been with 826 since the beginning. She used to do snacks. She used to provide, she used to make snack for after school, and all of her children have gone through 826 programming, and now all of those children's little cousins are going through 826 programming. So that's something that's really beautiful there. But absolutely, gentrification affects our families, you know, whether that means that our families have had to move further out of the mission and now have to like commute into that. But I think that's one thing too that like is really beautiful about the mission, that there is really deep community there and people look out for each other. And so 826 has this really beautiful thing where we have like a really solid group of parents who know about 826, who spread the word to like, you know, their comadres or their friends, and then recruit other students. And I think it makes it difficult, yes, in the sense that like families might be facing like housing insecurity, but the one thing that they have is this free program that allows their children to be in a space for 4 hours after school, right? That they'll get like 2 snacks while they're there, and they'll be receiving like tutoring support. I think it's very like homey in that sense, where we even have an area where parents can just also sit and wait for their students to be done with their tutoring session. But yeah, it's definitely one of the challenges, and we definitely see it affecting our students. Our students write about it all the time, how the mission is changing. And that's another thing too that we provide, right? You want to write about how you see gentrification in your community? Absolutely, write it, and now we're going to post it somewhere so people know that this is happening.
I like how you mentioned a lot of the negative changes that impact students. It is important, and you know, it's heavily like seen through gentrification. What would some other needs be for the program that they look for? Like, what are some of the other things that they like help other POC children with?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I would say, how have these changes impacted 826 and their outlook for the needs that these children need, other than like snacks and like support? What are some other things that you would say that they help with?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've been looking at a lot that we've moved to doing is just connecting people to other resources. One thing about nonprofit work is that you are very familiar with other services that people might be receiving. So we have, you know, we go to our local food banks, we connect people to that. the women's building is right around the corner from there, so there's a ton of programs that are there that support community members. So I think one way we definitely do is like all of our programs are free, and often some of them like pay our students, so that's definitely something that we've advocated for. And like, yes, it's great that students are, learning how to write and like being inspired to write. But one other thing that's also great is them getting money for it, right? To pay students, to give them money, to give them like financial support. That's definitely something that we've done, but also just like making sure that our outreach is really targeted and making sure that we are directly serving the students that need it the most. And that's definitely like a strategy we use when we recruit students, when we ask students to be part of our programs. And that's why we're so intentional with working with like Mission High School, Downtown High School, which is a continuation high school that serves primarily like African American like population and things like that. So being very specific about who we partner with and what programs we support and what services we provide for free.
Okay. You mentioned like, some methods of like outreaching and stuff. So you guys being a nonprofit organization, what methods do you use to inform the community? Or what are some new methods that you guys want to try? Like, I know you guys have like the parents, telling their comadres and stuff, and like kids telling other students. What are some like new ways that you guys are like trying to like do more outreach?
Yeah, so we have a very strong and capable social media like presence and social media team. I'm not really familiar with like what we do social media wise, but like internally, like for my programs, for example, I always make sure to let students know like what other programs we have like available to them. So letting them know that there's free Sunday tutoring, letting them know that we have workshops, letting them know about other programs that I manage. So that and alone, like I can go into the classroom and inform like 30 eighth graders that they are available to participate in this like one program that pays them $500 per semester, right? So that is like definitely how I do my outreach, especially when I'm recruiting for my programs. As for like other outreach, unfortunately I'm not part of that team that does that, so I'm not too familiar other than the like word, like putting up posters and recruiting students. And I think we do a lot of like working with teachers that we partner with writing programs. So like I'm in communication with a lot of teachers a lot of the times, and I'm always like emailing them things that I have that I think their students would be great for. So that's another way that like I do a lot of my outreach, like sending flyers to teachers and communicating them about like new opportunities that are available and that I think like their students would be perfect for.
Overall, what would be some positive outcomes that have been made throughout your work with youth that you're like really proud of?
Yeah, I'm really proud of the scholarships that we're able to give. I was actually part of our scholarship interview committee this year. And it was amazing. We got to give 6 scholarships of $20,000 to students that have been in our programs for like years, and not only are they going to be receive financial support, but they also get college mentorship throughout their full 4 years of college, and career advice and all these different resources and they're all first generation students. So that's something that's like really tangible, right? Like we give you money for school if you want to go to school, and we provide college mentorship and career advice and all these other resources that you need as a first gen student. And I think that's probably one of like my favorite things that we do, especially being like a kid who also received a scholarship of that size to go to school. Like I know how important that is, and I think that was really awesome to be part of like an interviewing group that like I'm also first generation. I also needed a scholarship to get through college. I also needed all these resources, and like being able to be a face that like mirrors that was like probably one of my favorite things that I've done thus far.
That's great.
That's really amazing about the scholarships. I remember when I was a student at my high school and I got a scholarship, I was so happy. So I'm pretty sure just even that aspect of your program having the scholarship for students, especially like first generation students, I know that they appreciate it so much. And even you're a witness to that. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So good. So
so yeah. So I mean, what is important that this program keeps, I guess, to better word it, how is this space 826 Valencia vital to the mission community?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. I think continuing to be a hub of resources for students is definitely our biggest impact and accomplishing, and what's really important. It's supporting students in elementary school, middle school, and high school. We have students that started with us when they're from 6 years old and are now in our teen groups. I have a handful of students like that who have been here longer than me, right? And who can tell me oh yeah, 3 years ago when Alyssa was doing this, we were doing it this way. And I'm well, it's different now. But but just being a hub of resources, being a hub of possibilities for students, and also paid opportunities for students, right? Keeping students engaged in writing, and also giving them tangible things for that, I think is one of the most useful things that we can do. And also encouraging their voices, right? Especially how we've mentioned of all these things that are now affecting their neighborhoods, of gentrification and housing instability and all the things that are going on with this pandemic. We're still doing things virtually, and we're giving students an outlet to express themselves, and also a platform to share how they're feeling. I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can do for a 14, 15-year-old right now. It's just giving them a place where they feel seen and heard and cared for. I think that's one of the biggest things we do, and why it's so important to be there. And also people know who we are, people have had their older siblings come through these programs, or older cousins, their friends, and now are just we're deeply embedded in the mission community. I think it's really beautiful. And like I said, we have parents who literally just sit at our site and just wait for their kids to be tutored. And it's very we're very known, but it's also because we do really good work, and students clearly benefit from it. And I think one of my biggest things too is that we offer financial support for certain students. I know in a perfect world we could give out 100 scholarships, but unfortunately capitalism doesn't allow that. But I think, yeah, that's why we're important, giving students a place to feel seen, heard, and sharing their voices and encouraging their voices.
Will these students ever come back, after they're done with the program too?
I've seen a handful. So actually, one of my coworkers is an 826 alumni. So yeah, and a lot of 826 alumni intern, volunteer. We now have an alumni board where we're engaging more 826 alumni. So yeah, there's a lot, and actually a handful of 826 alumni who received scholarships were on the same committee as me, interviewing potential new scholarship recipients. So there's a really big engagement where students, former students, realize that this was a really helpful thing for them, and they want to continue that.
Okay. What have you learned from working with this community program? I know you mentioned a lot of things, but I would say one of the most important things that you've learned that you want to integrate as an educator, or just yourself.
Yeah, I think one of the things that being an educator has taught me, and even throughout this work, has been to just really be myself and honor my identities and where I come from, and bring them into every room that I enter. I think one of the first things that one of my students told me when I was starting to run our youth leadership advisory board was you're the first Latina to do this, and she was also Latina, Mexican, first generation, had a lot of very similarities, and just reminded me of my little cousins. And just I think realizing that, and realizing that a lot of students identify with me, and even wearing the fucking sorry, I didn't mean to cuss. Even wearing my little virgencita cadenita and things like that. students recognize that, students see that, students feel, students feel like represented in that. And just, I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned in being an educator and working in the mission, is that I have to like be just as real as I'm asking these students to be. And like, I guess what I'm trying to sum it up is that like being reciprocal and vulnerability that you ask students will take you so much further when you like reciprocate that vulnerability with them.
That's so beautiful. I'm like speechless, but maybe another question I could ask is like, what do students teach you? Like, what are some lessons you've learned from your own students being there?
Yeah, I think honestly, they like continue to help me grow with my own writing and finding joy in my own writing. I'm like a self-proclaimed poet, and my students have like really encouraged my poetry just as much as I encourage their own. And it's like, oh, I miss them so much. But yeah, like, definitely just like learning to trust myself and learning to trust my instincts, because I feel like I have a lot of imposter syndrome still that I'm working towards through. And every time I have like a student like do something really special with like an assignment that I've created, I'm like, yeah, like I am a really good educator, and my students do get what I'm trying to say, and like they like produce such amazing work with the guidance that I provided. So I think one thing that my students have taught me is to like really trust my instincts.
Yeah. We learned something new. And you are a poet. You got to, affirm that. We are all poets,
Yes.
with our writing. Also,
Yes.
too, me, I'm a race and resistance and Latino studies major with a minor in education. What are some words of advice that you have for students? Wait, my bad. What are some words of advice that you have for students?
Yes.
I guess what I'm trying to ask, my bad, I read that wrong, is like any advice for me who's trying to go into like something with working with nonprofit and with youth. Any words of advice?
Trust your instincts. Know that your gut feeling is always leading you towards the right path, and like be true to who you are and stand up for yourself. Like advocate for yourself like no other, because no one's gonna have your back other than the POCs in your organization. Like really like trust yourself and advocate for yourself, because you know your worth, you know what you're bringing to the table, and other people will try to convince you that that's not the way we should be doing things, but you know better.
That's a good.
If you were able to talk to your students right now, what would be some words of advice right now during the pandemic and during this harsh time of education?
Yeah. Well, I've actually been meeting with my students weekly, virtually. It's probably been the highlight of my weeks, and like providing the most normalcy that I can have. But I think yesterday we actually had a really beautiful conversation about resilience. And one thing I ended like my meeting with is that like them just even showing up for these virtual meetings is resilience. So just like thank yourself for getting you through this much. Thank yourself for getting out of bed. Thank yourself for feeding yourself. And thank yourself for continuing to take care of yourself.
I really like that. I have to tell myself that too.
Yeah, dude, like if we're going through a pandemic, like the bare minimum is more than enough right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It can be really hard to just transition from like face-to-face contact to all of a sudden just camera to face.
Yeah. I have
So I
like
understand.
virtual meeting fatigue sometimes. I'm like, I need to move. I've been at the same place for 2
Move
hours.
from one bedroom to the other.
I'm gonna
Yes.
go from my bed to my couch.
I'm like, I'm tired of being in the living room. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Zoom sent me a little pop-up thingy. Okay. Thank you, Yareli, so much for allowing us to interview you. The recording we did today will be processed by me and Jessica. If you want us to send it to you, you have to sign I believe, a release form. I think Jessica sent it to you.
Yeah, I sent it to you in the email.
Okay, and with that being said, like, thank you again so much for our oral history project. You helped us so much, and it was really amazing, like, listening to your background in this space, and also, like, just like you're POC, and you're amazing, and just being an educator in this space, like, you're literally, like, people like you, like POC women's queer folks, like, you guys are the reasons why I want to continue doing, like, nonprofit work, and why I want to get into working with youth, because exactly how you feel and how you light up when you're with your students, and the way that you talk about education, that's what I want to do, and that's what I strive for. And I really didn't expect, like, this interview going like this and meeting somebody. Like, I literally, like, I want to go to that space when all of this is done, and, like, get to know you, get to know the space even more, and, like, see what this space is about with, like, all these students, all these youth. Maybe I could volunteer. I would love to.
Yeah, we need more POC volunteers. Right now, it's a lot of elderly white folks, and it's hard to get them to connect with my kids. So I'm always advocating for more POC like volunteers. So when this is all over, you are more than welcomed. But yes, we need you to be in this field. Kids need you. Kids need to see people that look like them and, like, leading things and being leaders, and, like, you know, being the ones that are the ones in charge. Like, one time one of my kids was like, "You're the boss, huh?" And I was like, I mean, yeah, kind of. Like, right now, yes. I am the boss. He's like, "That's sick." I'm like, yeah, it is.
It really is. I just remember, like, when I was at 86, for the short time that I was there, I had fallen in love with it already. I love the project that you guys were doing with the children. I love, like, the children, even though some of them are all crazy and all over, like, you still enjoy your time with them. And just everything that, like, 86 stands for. Like, I fell in love with it, and I was so sad when school started getting, like, shut down. I couldn't go anymore because I was just like, I was so excited for the cooking book that we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I was like so sad about it.
We're actually, total side note, but we are actually working on getting some virtual tutoring going. If you want to
Okay.
be for the cookbook specifically.
Okay.
If you want to be a part of that, we can talk about that, because I am looking.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
I'm
It would
sure.
actually
Yeah, we
make
can
me
start
feel
a
like I'm
couple
doing
because we're
something.
building it out, but I miss all those sassy girls just as much.
True.
There were so much. I love them all. Yeah, it's a great place to be. And I think one thing that, like, I really love about, like, my specific team and, like, job is that I get to be in schools. Like, I'm, you know, I'm not part of the after school. I'm, like, directly in the schools, get to see them in, like, middle school with, like, all their little friends, and, like, get to make connections. And I don't know, I love, like, that I can do, like, a one-day project at Everett, and then this kid, Angel, will, like, look at me at the hallway and be like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "I'm here. It's my job." And he's like, "Are you working in my class today?" I'm like, "Not today." He's like, "Okay, well, when?" I'm like, "Soon." But, like, yeah, building connections with them, and, like, you know, becoming a face that's, like, very regular in their lives, and not, like, just an adult that, like, walks in and, like, then leaves. I'm, like, consistent in, like, the engagement that we have, is really special.
Yeah. I hope this all, like, blows over soon so that we're able to see them again. But I know for sure that I'll be coming back because I enjoyed it that much.
Hopefully we go back. But
Fingers
you know,
crossed.
let's just continue to take care of ourselves, and reassuring our students, well, just our peers and everything, that, you know, we gotta take pride in, you know, just the little steps, getting out of bed, even just coming to this virtual meeting, and, like, all of that. Just think ourselves, like, we got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all are still in
Thank
school.
you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Ellie.
Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
So I believe I end this meeting somewhere.
Yeah.
If you're the host, it should say on the bottom, like, end meeting.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.